Then he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of the street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations." Unquote. I'll explain why the fruit yields every month in due time, but the key thing here is that there are 12 kinds of fruit on the tree. These 12 fruits are of course the 12 points that surround the dove, the 12 around the 13, exemplified on the hexagram. Christ and the 12 disciples, the sun and the 12 constellations, Israel and the 12 tribes. You know the drill. Having established all this, it is key to understand that the hexagram is also the cube, or more specifically, the cube within a cube, Metatron's cube. The outer cube is space, the inner cube is time, from which space unfolds. 6 points around the 7th. The 7th point is shared by the inner cube, which has its own 6 points around that very same 7th point. As above, so below, as within, so without. Essentially, it's an infinitely unfolding fractal in which the 7th point is always the 7th point in the centre of 6 points. It is the gateway between every fractal, the beginning and the end. Thus, the cube within the cube represents the 2 6s around the 7, and is 12 around the 13 overall. As is clear from the symbolism here, time and space are essentially one entity. Isis, that's space, on the cube, which is time, 7/4. Since space-time is a cube, we should explore some of the mysteries of the cube. First of all, the cube is the sum of all of its parts, and its parts are squares. 6 squares in all. Time is the 4th dimension, and its symbol is both the cube and the square. The square is, for obvious reasons, symbolic of the number 4. If you were living in a world like Plato's cave, for instance, where all you knew was shadows, then the square would be your version of the cube. If you divided that square into 4 sections by drawing an X on it, you would have your Stargate out of there. You would have a portal into 3D world. You would essentially be looking into a cube from one of its 6 faces, directly at the forbidden fruit, aka Christ or Antichrist, in the centre of that cube. So you would be looking at the 7 that is surrounded by a 6, and you would have achieved this by dividing one of the 6 into 4. Clearly, the same is true for each face of the cube. The 6 faces of the cube, which surround the 7 in the centre, all become doorways when divided into 4. Now, we live in a 3-dimensional world, the 3 dimensions being the 3 visible faces of the cube, but there are 6 faces in all, surrounding the 7 in the centre. This is why there are 6 doors on the checkered corridor, as well as a 7th in the centre. Once again, this is achieved by dividing a square into 4 sections. The 7 doors in the square are the 7/4. The 4 lines on the square lead to the forbidden fruit. So they are the 4 rivers in the Garden of Eden. Nonetheless, I'm digressing here, so getting back on track. We can see that these squares are 4s, and that each face of the cube is a 4. So the 3 visible faces are 3 4s, and 3 4s gives us 12. Now there are 6 faces on the cube in all, when we include the hidden or the dark 3 faces, meaning that all in all there are 6 4s, and 6 4s equals 24. The number of hours in a day, the dark 12 and the light 12, each surrounding 13 in the centre. The cube is time, so this is no surprise. Da Vinci, of course, summed up the light 12 perfectly in the Last Supper painting. You have Christ and his 12 disciples being the 12 around the 13, but he made sure to include 4 doors on either side to illustrate that each side of the cube is a 4. Dividing into 4s helps us to discern the mysteries of the cube, and therefore time. We have the year with its 12 months divided into 4 seasons. The month with its 4 weeks, each 7 days. The day with its 4 periods, that's morning, afternoon, evening and night. 12 hours of light and 12 hours of dark, at least symbolically. 24 in all. The hour with its 4 quarters and 60 minutes. The 60 minutes reflect the 6 faces of the cube because zeros don't count. As we can see, dividing into 4s is commonplace with time, just as the Gospel of Christ is divided into 4. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. There is a reason for this. Just as dividing the square into 4 opened the portal to the 7, and dividing each side of the cube into 4 makes the 7 into a 13, we can unveil the number once and for all, using the same method again on the 12 around the 13. As with this zodiac divided into 4 sections to mark the solstice and the equinox periods, giving us summer, spring, winter and autumn, the 4 seasons, 12 divided by 4 gives us 3. So each section is a section of 3. However, there are 2 12s, a light and a dark 12. Since the overall result of 4 times 6 is 24, so 24 divided by 4 would actually give you 6 to every section. These would be the 6 hours of each of the 4 periods of the day: morning, afternoon, evening and night. That's if we count morning as sun-up and night as sundown. You could extend this to your 7-day week if you classify Sunday, the special holy day of rest, as the 7 in the centre surrounded by the 6 days of the week. Or some would say Sunday is the first day, but really it doesn't matter because either way, that point in the centre is both the beginning and the end. So either way you look at it, Sunday is the sun, Christ, in the centre. The 6 days are the 6 planets. Monday is the moon, Tuesday is Mars, Wednesday is Mercury, Thursday is Jupiter, Friday is Venus, and Saturday is Saturn. 6 around the 7. Like all fractals of time, the week divides into 4. Sunday is the centre, but a week has 2 days called the weekend, which starts at the end of the 5th day, usually Friday, but officially midnight Saturday. Since each week has these 2 special days, and a month is the culmination of 4 weeks, we have 4 2s, which is 8. Why is that significant? Well, it gives us a slight hint as to where we're going with this overall concept. But it represents the hidden 8th veil of Isis on the cube, which is that hidden 8th corner. What is most important though is where it is hidden. It is obscured directly behind the 7th corner, meaning that for all intents and purposes, it is one with the 7th corner. They're more as an idea than a corner in its own right, just as the octave is symbolic of the number 8, but has only 7 notes. There is an 8th, but that 8th is just the beginning of the next 7. So 8 is the beginning and the end, continuing ad infinitum. The 7 and the 8 are different expressions of the same concept. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. The octave of 7 notes. The rainbow of 7 colours. The 7 chakras. The ancient Christians used to celebrate a sacred 8th day. It was only a symbolic day, but to them it represented the resurrection of Christ. The Beatles, the Fab Four, have a song called 8 Days a Week. It's just a love song, but the concept of an 8th day is nothing new. The 8 manifests in our 7-day week as the 8-hour-a-day work shift, which takes place in the 5 working days of the week. These 5 days are the 5 black keys of the piano, between the 7 notes of the octave. 5 8-hour shifts is 5 times 8, which comes to 40. Understanding that zeros don't count, this gives us our 4. So that is how the week divides into 4, in the hidden sense of the word. Hidden because the 8 is hidden. If we divide the 7-day week as a whole into 4, we will see Isis on the cube bringing forth the hidden fruit, aka the sun. Why? Because 7 divided by 4, aka 7 over 4, is 1.75, numerologically giving us 13, aka the sun. And of course, if you want to take it even further, folding back into 4 when you add the 1 and the 3. The sun divided by 4, the 4 seasons, the 4 weeks, etc., etc. Now, this begs the question, does Isis bring the fruit forth, or does she bring it forth? So the 7 days of the week divided by 4 leads right back to 4. Why? Because you go from the outer cube to the inner cube. As within, so without. The fractal continues infinitely yielding cubes, aka 4s. Now that we've established that, the 7-day week is 168 hours long, meaning that when we divide the week into 4, 7 over 4, we are dividing the 168 into 4 quarters. When you do this, the result is that each quarter is 42 hours long. That's 1 day in 18 hours, 42 hours in all. 42 is the number of the rainbow with its 7 colours, synonymous with the 7 notes of the octave, meaning yet again we have just crossed the rainbow bridge into the next fractal down, by which I mean the next cube of 7 veils, infinitely unfolding. So just to recap, the year with its 12 months breaks down into 4 seasons, 3 months to every season. The month breaks down to 4 weeks, 7 days to every week, which is 28 days, the minimum amount of days that a month can have. And on a side note, the film 28 Days Later, which is about a rage virus, uses the biohazard symbol, which has within it the 3 edges of the cube, emanating from the hole of Darth, the 7th point. It bears resemblance to the Anti-Karana. Now, Biohazard is also the Japanese name for the Resident Evil franchise, which uses this symbol, the umbrella, for Umbrella Corporation. And since umbrellas symbolise possession, it's no stretch of the imagination that Resident Evil is a reference, synchronistically at least, to possession, as in evil residing within the temple, aka the vessel, Resident Evil. See, all of these films about outbreaks and so-called viruses are heavy on the changed eye colour symbolism of possession. The Rec films, for instance, revealed at the end of the first to literally be about possession, are aptly titled, as the word rec comes from the Latin word recordare, and it has its roots in the word cordis, meaning the heart. The heart is the exact place that a demon would reside. Nonetheless, continuing where we left off, 28 days is the minimum amount of days in a month, and a month is 4 weeks. Now, since Sunday is the 7 in the centre, and the 7 is always in the centre, surrounded by the 6, the 4 Sundays of the month can be subtracted, leaving 24 days around the centre. The 24 days would in that case be the higher fractal of the 24 hours of the day. 4 sixes around the infinite 7 of Sunday. The cube infinitely unfolding out of itself. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and so on and so forth. This brings new or perhaps old meaning to the term a month of Sundays. It may also interest you to know that percentage-wise, 1.75% of 24 is 0.42, and 1.75 times 24 is 42. So we've discovered the fractals in time, aka the cube, from the year and its 4 seasons, to the month and its 4 weeks, to the week and its 4 42s. And we have determined that time can be shown to be emanating from the cube in scales. The next fractal down from the week is the day, which also divides into 4 sixes. So the next logical step would be the hour, with its 60 minutes, giving us 6 in numerology. The hour is obviously measured from 1 to 12. But once again, we'll find what we're looking for by dividing the hour into 4. It is then that we will discover the true number at the centre of the time cube, which the 7th veil, or the 13 in the centre, are expressions of. No doubt most of you already know, but I'll break it down anyway. The 4 quarters of an hour are 12, 3, 6 and 9. 12 folds into 3 in numerology, so that's 3, 3, 6, 9 ad infinitum. As was to be expected, the 9 is at the centre of everything, meaning the 9 is at the centre of time, revealed by dividing into 4. 9 is the controlling force, and the 3 and the 6 are its male and female poles. Now, in order to make sure that we're all on the same page here, let's just go over briefly some of Marco Rodin's work on the 9 and its significance. First, we draw a circle. Next, we plot numbers from 1 to 9 around it at approximately 40 degrees. There's our 4 again. Binary works by doubling the value of numbers starting with 1. Now, the double of 1 is 2. So, we draw a line from 1 to 2. 2 doubled is 4. So, the line goes from 2 to 4. 4 doubled is 8. So, 4 to 8. 8 doubled is 16. Well, 1 add 6 is 7. So we go from 8 to 7. 7 doubled is 14. So that's 5. 5 doubled is 10. So that's 1. This pattern of doubling continues infinitely. Each doubled number stays within the confines of the pattern. This pattern is therefore duality. The duality of our world. Cell division, for example, follows this pattern. 1 cell becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 16, 32, 64, and then the cells break off and do their own thing. Music scales double the same way in harmonics. Nuclear reaction works this way, with doubling neutrinos. Binary code. See, the list goes on. The duality is in everything. And it works exactly the same way backwards as well. Half of 1 is 0.5. Half of 0.5 is 0.25, so that's 7. Half of 0.25 is 0.125, so 8. Half of 0.125 is 0.0625, so 4. And so on and so forth. Infinity within a boundary. So the pattern is 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1, infinitely. This means that the only 3 numbers left untouched are the 3, the 6, and the 9. These numbers don't factor into the duality at all. So if we double them, what do we find? Well, 3 doubled is 6. 6 doubled is 12, which folds into 3. 12 doubled is 24. 2 plus 4 is 6. 24 doubled is 48, giving us 12, which is 3. So the result is always 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6, infinitely. Now I already showed how 3 and 6 is interwoven into the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 in my subliminal spells video. This is just another way of explaining it. Nonetheless, 3 plus 6 is 9. Hence 9 being at the centre of everything. The 3 and the 6 are its yin and yang poles. The hour divided into 4 is 12, 3, 6 and 9. So 3, 3, 6, 9. The 9 is at the centre of time. Now, each quarter of an hour is 3 hours. 3 divided by 4. 4 threes around the centre. In other words, 12 around the 13. If we break that down by each quarter, we get 3 around a 4. Add the next 3, we get 6 around the 7. Add the next, we have 8 around the 9. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, shouldn't that be 9 around the 10? Well, the answer is no. You cannot have 9 around the 10, because 10 numerologically becomes 1. So the cycle ends and begins as soon as the clock strikes 9. The value of the number in the centre cannot exceed the value of the amount surrounding it. Neither can it match it. 9 around the 10 does fill this criteria, but 9 is the highest expression in numerology. So 10 becomes 1. What this ultimately means is that the minute the 8th hour ends, meaning the minute that the 8 around the 9 in the centre becomes 9, the number in the centre reverts back to 1. Now, you obviously cannot have a 9 around a 9. The two 9s cannot meet. They cannot coexist. This means that the 8 around the 9 is the highest expression of time before the cycle reverts back to the beginning. 3, 6, 9, and then back to 3. Just 3, 6, 9, 3, 6, 9 continuously. So 3, 6, 9 is 3/4 of an hour big hand and 9 hours little hand. Each quarter is a 3. So naturally it starts again at 3 wherever it falls. And the 1 in the centre takes on the value of 4, simply because it is 1 higher than 3. The next quarter would naturally be 6, so the number in the centre is 7. And last of all, 9, where the centre number would automatically go back to 1. So the 8th hour surrounds the 9 in the centre. And as soon as the 8th hour becomes the 9th, death rebirth takes place. The 8th hour, therefore, just like the 8th corner of the cube and the symbolic 8th day of the week, as well as the so-called 8th note in the octave, is the hidden veiled number, revealed by the division of 4, the 4/4 of the hour, reborn every 3/4. The 8 around the 9. Now, the 369 moves counterclockwise around the clock. The cycle begins at a new quarter every time, a new 3. So the 9th hour and 9 in the centre never share the same space. It won't view its own reflection. Now, although the two 9s never meet, the highest expression of 8 around the 9 reveals a hidden hint, which alludes to its impossible identity. That being the fact that 8 around the 9 simply means 8 surrounding a 1. The 1 and the 8. The 1 and the 8 are 18. The sum of two 9s meeting, which is kind of a strange cosmic joke when you think about it. The 3/4 of the hour, aka the 369, moving backwards through time, have a fixed value of 0.75. Now they're moving around a 1 in the centre. These 3/4 are the 3 faces of Isis, the 369. So 0.75 circling 1 can be thought of as 1.75 in that sense. Isis bringing forth the fruit. So that would be 12 hours, which is 4/4. 12 around the 13. What really matters is that 8 around the 9 is the highest expression of time. The 12 around the 13 just becomes 3 around the 4, because in numerology, 12 becomes 3 and 13 becomes 4. So it's just the beginning of a new 369. Again, 3 surrounds the 4, 6 surrounds the 7, and 9 around the 10, which automatically restarts the cycle at 1, meaning you don't go above 9. Thus, 8 around the 9 is as high as it gets before the cycle ends and begins again. 8 around the 9 is the true expression of the cube. 8 around the 9 shows the cube to have 8 corners. Thus, the 8th veil is dropped and the fruit in the centre is 9. Since we've found that 8 is the highest hour numerologically, and it surrounds the ultimate expression of 9, and that it never truly strikes 9 on the clock, because the second that that happens, 9 in the centre goes back to 1 and restarts the cycle again, which starts a new 3, 6, 9. It's worth examining the number 8, using our usual method, of course, of dividing by 4. Well, 8 divided by 4 is 2. Now we're talking about 8 around the 9 here, so plotting each of the 4 divisions of 8 around 1 in the centre, you get, starting with the first 2, 2 around the 3, 4 around the 5, the 5 elements with the 5th being spirit or ether, and if you cast your mind back, the 4 weekends that I mentioned earlier, adding up to 8. Each weekend is a 2, which leaves the 5 days with their 8-hour work periods. The 5 eighths. And as I said earlier, those 5 days are the 5 black keys hidden between the octave. Octave being the hidden 8th veil. Anyway, in all, we have the 2 around the 3, the 4 around the 5, and the 6 around the 7, leaving the ultimate expression as 8 around the 9. Now, how do we express this on the cube? We only have 3 visible faces to work with, and 7 visible corners. Well, we do the same thing as usual. We divide into 4. Just as dividing the square into 4 opens the portal into the centre of the cube in Flatland or 2D World, we divide the 3 visible faces into 4, as each face is a 4 already, and there are 3 of them. That's 3 4s, which is 12, or more accurately, 12 around the 13. All we're doing is emphasising what is already there. What we need to do is divide the 3 by 4, the 3 faces. Well, 3 divided by 4 equals 0.75. That's 3 quarters. But we're not dividing 3 by 4 mathematically, we are dividing the 3 faces of the cube into 4, individually. And since each face is a 4, that's 4 divided by 4, which is 1. So each of the 3 squares or faces, when divided, equal 1. The best way for me to illustrate this is with a square, so 1 face. And just like before, we divide it into 4 by drawing an X on it. By doing this, we create a 5th point in the centre, the 5th element, or ether, or spirit. This is of course the fruit in the centre of the cube, but we're looking for the 9, and as it stands right now, we have a 5. Since the idea is to do this with all 3 visible faces, we need to take a step back and view the cube as a whole. So, taken as a whole, the 3 faces divided individually into 4 in this manner gives us 3 5s, by which I mean 3 5th points. Well, 3 5s is 15, but understanding that the 5th point of each 3 squares is just the fruit in the centre of the cube, from the perspective of each square, we can subtract 3 from 15, which leaves us with 12. That being the 12 around the 13. The 13 being the fruit in the centre. Well, that's all well and good, but we're looking for the 9, which naturally would be surrounded by the 8. And there doesn't seem to be any sign of it. Or does there? What if we flip the cube upside down and view it from a different perspective? And what do we have here? Well, we have the usual 7 points, but the addition of the 3 x's have changed something quite significant. Each x has produced 3 new points making 10 in all. 10 breaks back down to 1 in numerology, beginning the cycle again, which just means going from the outer cube to the inner cube. But we're not really looking at a 10 here. What we're looking at is this. The compass and square, aka the 9. Understanding that this is the 9, we can see that these 2 points are not points at all. They are the intersecting areas of the compass of 9, not separate points in their own right. They are not marked as points on the original compass of 9, thus they should not be marked here either. This means that we do not have 10 points on the cube after all. We are now reduced to 8 points. Moreover, the top of the compass peaks where the 8th corner would be. So just as we gain a new point, we immediately lose another behind the 9. Just as with the octave and the ancient tradition of the 8th day, that was not in fact a day, but a symbolic gesture pointing towards the idea of an 8th day. Well, the 8th remains veiled, hidden behind the 9, or more accurately, at one with it. This matters little, as while the 8th itself is obscured, there are still 8 points, which is rather paradoxical, but easy enough to understand when you know that the 9 is the middle pillar, and the middle pillar is the combination of 2, thus cannot be seen without one or the other. In this case, there is 8, but only to make the 9 visible. So we've seen the 9 within the cube, and yet there is still more to be revealed.